The fires had burned for 3 days before they finally died. Not because anyone put them out, but because there was nothing left to burn. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the viewport of her ship and looked down at what remained of New Geneva. The planet had been beautiful once. Green forests, blue oceans, cities that sparkled like jewels in the night. Now it was gray and black and dead. Radiation clouds swirled across the surface like angry ghosts. 4,200,000 people had lived there. Families, children, farmers, and teachers and doctors. They had built homes and planted gardens and dreamed of the future. The Velthari Dominion had ended all of it in less than 6 hours. Elena closed her eyes and remembered the distress calls. She had listened to every single one. The screaming, the crying, the mother who begged someone, anyone, to save her children, the old man who simply said goodbye to a wife who had died 20 years before. The silence that came at the end. She opened her eyes. She had work to do. The Galactic Council chamber was the largest structure Elena had ever seen. It floated in space, a massive sphere made of crystal and light. Inside, representatives from 347 different species sat in rows that stretched up toward a ceiling so high it disappeared into darkness. Some of them had tentacles, some had wings, some were made of living stone or flowing water or pure energy. All of them watched Elena as she walked to the center of the chamber. The High Arbiters sat at the highest point. There were 7 of them, each from an ancient species that had existed long before humans learned to make fire. The eldest was called the First Voice. He was made of crystal, and light moved inside him like slow lightning. His species had helped create the Council 12,000 years ago. He had been alive for most of that time. Elena stood alone in the center of the chamber. She felt very small. "You may speak," the First Voice said. His words echoed through the chamber like bells. Elena activated her display. Images appeared in the air around her. The burning cities, the dead forests, the mass graves that stretched for miles, the radiation readings that showed nothing would live on New Geneva for 10,000 years. 3 weeks ago, Elena said, the Velthari Dominion attacked our colony world of New Geneva. They used planet-killing weapons. They targeted civilian centers. They ignored all calls for surrender. When the attack ended, 4,200,000 human beings were dead. She let the images speak for themselves. The chamber was silent. "We have evidence," Elena continued. "Sensor logs from our defense satellites. Communication records showing no warning was given. Survivor testimony from the 12 ships that escaped." She paused. 12 ships, out of a population of millions. The Velthari ambassador rose from his seat. He was tall and covered in dark green scales. His eyes were yellow and cold. His species had ruled 100 worlds for 8,000 years. They had never apologized for anything. "The territory was ours," he said simply. "We claimed it 6,000 years before humans existed. Your colony was an invasion. We removed it." Elena felt her hands shake. She forced them to be still. "There were children on that planet," she said. "Schools, hospitals. They were not soldiers. They were not a threat. They were families trying to build a life." The Velthari ambassador showed his teeth. His species did that when they were amused. They were trespassers. "The law is clear." The First Voice raised a crystalline hand. Silence fell instantly. "The Council will deliberate," he announced. Elena watched as the High Arbiters turned to each other. She watched their lights pulse and flicker as they communicated in ways she could not understand. She watched the representatives of 347 species wait in silence. 9 minutes passed. The First Voice turned back to the chamber. "The Council has reached a decision," he said. "The attack on New Geneva was regrettable. However, the Velthari Dominion possessed prior territorial documentation. The legal status of the colony was ambiguous. Therefore, no crime has been committed under Council law." Elena felt the words hit her like physical blows. "Furthermore," the First Voice continued, "humanity is commanded to accept a peace accord with the Velthari Dominion. There will be no retaliation. There will be no military action. The dead will be honored through diplomatic means. The chamber began to murmur. Representatives nodded or clicked or hummed in approval. The ancient order had spoken. The matter was settled. Elena stood very still. "And if we refuse?" she asked. The murmuring stopped. Several representatives made sounds of shock. No species had ever asked that question. Not in 12,000 years. The first voice looked at her. For the first time, something like emotion flickered in his ancient eyes. "Then humanity will stand alone," he said. "No species has defied the council and survived. You are young. You are small. You have existed for the blink of an eye. Do not make this mistake." Elena thought about the mother begging for her children. She thought about the old man saying goodbye to his dead wife. She thought about 4 million voices falling silent forever. She thought about what it meant to be human. "The Velthari killed 4 million of our people," she said. "You call it ambiguous. You command us to accept peace with their murderers. You tell us our dead will be honored through diplomacy." She looked up at the first voice. "What does that honor look like, exactly? Will you build a memorial? Will you send flowers? Will you tell the children of New Geneva that their deaths were legally unclear?" The first voice did not answer. Elena turned and walked toward the exit. Every eye in the chamber followed her. At the door, she stopped and looked back. "You have commanded peace," she said. "Humanity has heard you. But we have not forgotten our dead, and we do not forgive." She walked out of the chamber without waiting for a response. On her ship, she opened a secure channel to Earth. She typed one word and sent it to President Catherine Moreau. The word was Prometheus. On Earth, in a secure bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, President Moreau read the message. She closed her eyes for a long moment. Then she called an emergency meeting of every military commander, every scientist, and every leader humanity had. The Galactic Council had commanded peace. Humanity chose something else. 3 months after New Geneva burned, the galaxy believed humanity had accepted its place. Human diplomats smiled at council meetings. Human traders kept their schedules. Human representatives signed agreements and attended ceremonies, and said all the right words. The Velthari ambassador told his government that the young species had learned its lesson. The threat was over. He was wrong. Admiral James Okonkwo stood in a shipyard on Mars and watched the future take shape. The facility was officially listed as a civilian mining operation. The ships being built there were officially cargo haulers. The workers were officially employees of a transport company that existed only on paper. None of it was true. James was 62 years old. He had served in the human fleet for 40 years. He had planned to retire last year, to spend his remaining days on a small farm on New Geneva, close to his daughter Sarah and her family. Sarah had been a teacher. She had taught history to young children. She had believed that humanity's future was in the stars, in peace, in building something better. Sarah and her 2 children had died in the first hour of the attack. James looked at the ship taking shape before him. It was a monster of metal and weapons, bigger than anything humanity had ever built. He had named it himself, the New Geneva. "Admiral," a young officer approached him. "Dr. Tanaka has made a breakthrough. She requests your presence." James nodded and followed the officer through a maze of secret tunnels. They emerged in a laboratory filled with equipment that should not exist. According to official records, this research had been shut down years ago. Dr. Yuki Tanaka was waiting for him. She was small and tired-looking, with dark circles under her eyes. She had not slept more than 4 hours a night since New Geneva. Her sister had lived there. "Show me," James said. Yuki activated a display. Numbers and diagrams filled the air. "Velthari shields are considered unbreakable," she said. "They operate on a quantum frequency that shifts constantly. No weapon in the galaxy can predict the pattern." She smiled, and there was something fierce in it. "But I found something. The shifts are not random. They follow a mathematical sequence based on prime numbers. If we can calculate the sequence fast enough, we can fire weapons that phase through their shields like they are not there." James stared at her. "You are certain?" "I am certain. Their ships will be defenseless against us. James thought about the Velthari fleet. He thought about their confidence, their cruelty, their absolute belief that no one could touch them. He thought about what it would mean when that belief shattered. How long until we can install this on our ships? 6 months. Maybe less if we work around the clock. Then we work around the clock. Across human space, the same scenes played out in secret. On a frozen moon in the outer colonies, Sergeant Marcus Cole trained soldiers who did not officially exist. They were volunteers, every one of them. Teachers, farmers, engineers, doctors, people who had never held a weapon before New Geneva. People who could not sit quietly while their species was told to accept murder. Marcus had fought in border skirmishes for 20 years. He knew what war really looked like. He tried to prepare them. The Velthari are stronger than us, he told them. They are faster. Their technology is better. They have been fighting wars for 8,000 years. They think we are soft. They think we are weak. They think we will break. He looked at their faces, young and old, scared and angry. Human. They are wrong, he said. Humans do not break. We bend. We adapt. We survive. And when someone hurts our family, we make them pay. That is what we do. That is what we have always done. And that is what we will do now. On Earth, President Catherine Moreau played the most dangerous game of her life. She smiled at council observers and told them humanity wanted peace. She signed treaties she never intended to honor. She invited Velthari diplomats to dinners and pretended she did not want to kill them with her bare hands. Every day was a performance. Every word was a lie. At night, she read the reports from Mars and the frozen moon and 100 other hidden locations. She watched the numbers grow. Ships, soldiers, weapons, the pieces of a war machine that would shake the galaxy. The council grew suspicious. Their spy networks detected strange movements, energy signatures that did not match civilian operations, ships that traveled to destinations that did not exist on any map. The Velthari ambassador demanded inspections of human space. Catherine smiled and agreed. Of course, she said, we have nothing to hide. But there was so much paperwork, so many procedures to follow. The inspectors would need proper authorization, security clearances, health certificates. It would take time to arrange everything properly. Months passed. The inspectors never arrived. The paperwork was never complete. And all the while, the hidden shipyards worked day and night. 1 year after New Geneva, Admiral Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the New Geneva and looked at his fleet. 400 ships, hidden in the dark spaces between stars. Every one of them carried weapons that could cut through Velthari shields. Every one of them was crewed by humans who had lost someone, who remembered, who refused to forgive. He received a message from Earth. It contained 2 words. They are coming. The Velthari had lost patience. They were sending a fleet to Earth. 200 warships. Not to destroy, but to occupy. To remind humanity of its place. To break the spirit of a species that dared to be slow with paperwork. James smiled. It was not a kind smile. All ships, he said. Set course for Sol System. We have guests to welcome. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity looked like when it stopped pretending. The Velthari fleet entered Sol System like conquerors coming home. 200 warships moved through the darkness, their formations perfect, their weapons ready. Fleet Commander Rexus stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at the small blue planet in the distance. Earth, the homeworld of the troublesome humans. He had been given simple orders. Occupy the system. Establish control. Remind the humans that they were nothing. In the great order of the galaxy. Do not destroy them. Just break them. Rexus was confident. His ships were the finest in the Dominion. His crews had centuries of experience. The humans had a small defense fleet. Poorly equipped. Barely trained. According to Council records, Earth's orbital defense grid had been shut down years ago. This would be easy. The first sign of trouble came from his sensor officer. Commander, I am detecting energy signatures. Many of them. They were not there a moment ago. Rexus looked at the display. Hundreds of new contacts were appearing throughout the system. They were coming from asteroids, from moons, from empty space itself. "What are those?" he demanded. Before anyone could answer, the first shots were fired. Hidden defense platforms around Jupiter opened fire with weapons that should not exist. Beams of energy cut through the darkness and struck Velthari ships. To Rexus's horror, the beams went through their shields as if the shields were not there. 3 ships exploded in the first second. "All ships, evasive action," Rexus shouted. "Return fire." But there was more. Ships were emerging from hiding places all across the system. Dozens of them. Then, hundreds. They looked like mining vessels and cargo haulers on the outside. But their hulls were falling away to reveal weapons arrays beneath. The human fleet was not small and weak. It had been hiding in plain sight. And then the New Geneva appeared. Admiral James Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the largest warship humanity had ever built. Around him, his crew worked with calm precision. They had trained for this moment for a year. They were ready. "All ships," James said. "Operation Prometheus is active. Show them what we are." The human fleet attacked. Velthari commanders had studied human military history. They knew about the great wars of Earth's past. But reading about human warfare and experiencing it were very different things. Human tactics made no sense. They attacked from impossible angles. They retreated when they were winning and charged when they were losing. They used asteroids as weapons, pushing them into Velthari formations with small ships. When their guns ran empty, they rammed their enemies with their hulls. A young Velthari officer watched in horror as a human fighter craft, badly damaged and trailing fire, flew directly into the engine of a Dominion cruiser. The pilot did not eject. He did not try to escape. He just flew faster. "They are insane," the officer whispered. Commander Rexus tried to organize his fleet, but the humans were everywhere. For every ship he destroyed, 2 more seemed to appear. And the terrible weapons kept cutting through his shields, killing his crews, turning his proud warships into burning wreckage. 8 hours into the battle, Rexus received reports that made his blood run cold. "Commander, we have lost 112 ships. 112, more than half his fleet, gone in hours, against humans. Pull back," he ordered. "All ships, retreat to rally point." The New Geneva blocked his path. James Okonkwo looked at the Velthari flagship through the viewport. He thought about his daughter. He thought about his grandchildren who he would never meet. He thought about 4 million voices that had been silenced forever. "This is Admiral Okonkwo of the United Earth Fleet," he broadcast on all channels. "You came to our home. You came to break us. Now you learn what that costs." The New Geneva fired everything it had. The battle lasted 3 more hours. When it was over, 182 Velthari ships were debris drifting through space. The survivors, just 18 ships, fled toward the edge of the system. They broadcast warnings to anyone who would listen. "Do not come here. Do not attack the humans. They are not what we thought. They are something else. Something terrible." James let them go. He wanted the message to spread. He opened a channel to the Galactic Council. The transmission was received in the Great Crystal Chamber where Elena Vasquez had stood a year ago. 347 species watched in shocked silence as Admiral Okonkwo spoke. "You commanded peace," James said. "We chose survival. The Velthari brought war to our home. They thought we were weak. They thought we would accept their boot on our neck. They were wrong." He paused. Behind him, the stars of Sol System glittered through the viewport, and the wreckage of the Velthari fleet drifted like fallen leaves. "You told us no species has defied the Council and survived. Perhaps that was true once. But we are human. We have defied gods. We have conquered our own world. We have turned our worst instincts into our greatest strengths. We do not surrender. We do not forget. And we do not forgive." The human fleet gathered around the New Geneva. 400 ships. Battered, but unbroken. They turned away from Earth and faced the stars. "We are coming for the Velthari Dominion," James announced. Not for conquest, for justice, for New Geneva, for 4 million souls who deserved better. Any species that stands with the Dominion will share their fate. Any species that stands aside will be left in peace. He ended the transmission. In the council chamber, chaos erupted. Representatives shouted and screamed and demanded action. But the High Arbiters said nothing. For the first time in 12,000 years, they did not know what to do. The human fleet jumped toward Velthari space. The war had begun. The galaxy had never seen anything like the human war. In the council chamber, species that had been allies for centuries turned on each other. Some demanded that all military forces unite to destroy humanity before they grew stronger. Others argued that the humans had been wronged, that the Velthari deserved what was coming to them. The debates grew heated, then violent. For the first time in 8,000 years, a council representative was killed during a session. The Velthari Dominion, ancient and proud, felt something they had not experienced in millennia: fear. Supreme Leader Kethros gathered his generals in the Great War Hall of Velthar Prime. Maps of human space glowed on the walls around them. Reports arrived every hour, and every report was worse than the last. They struck our military station at Korax, a general reported. Destroyed it completely. Then they broadcast footage of what they found there. The slave pens, the execution chambers, the experiments. Kethros slammed his fist on the table. Those broadcasts are lies. They are not lies, Supreme Leader. And the galaxy is watching. The humans were fighting a different kind of war. They did not simply attack. They revealed. Every Velthari crime was documented and shared. Every atrocity was exposed. Species that had tolerated the Dominion for millennia began to question that tolerance. And the humans were not fighting alone. President Catherine Moreau had spent months sending secret messages to species that suffered under Velthari rule. The Kreth were the first to respond. They had been slaves of the Dominion for 3,000 years. Their bodies were used for labor, their minds for entertainment, their children for food. They had tried to rebel before. They had always failed. This time was different. Dr. Yuki Tanaka traveled to the Kreth homeworld in secret. She brought them the shield-breaking technology. She showed them how to build weapons that could hurt their masters. She looked into their large, sad eyes and made them a promise. "We will not abandon you," she said. "Fight with us, and you will be free." The Kreth rose up. Across 100 worlds, slaves turned on their masters. Factories that built Velthari weapons exploded. Ships that carried Velthari soldiers disappeared. The Dominion found itself fighting on 2 fronts. Then 3. Then 4. Other species joined the fight. The Morathi, who had lost their colonies to Velthari expansion. The Senkari, who remembered ancient insults. Even species that stayed officially neutral began to quietly help. Supply convoys were delayed. Intelligence was leaked. The old order was crumbling. Supreme Leader Kethros called upon ancient alliances. 3 species pledged their fleets to defend the Dominion. Together, they gathered the largest military force the galaxy had seen in 10,000 years. 800 warships assembled near Velthar Prime. Surely, this would be enough. Surely, the humans would see reason. Admiral Okonkwo saw the reports and gathered his captains. "They outnumber us more than 2 to 1, he told them. "Their ships are larger. Their technology is older and more proven. Military logic says we should retreat. Wait. Build more ships." He looked at their faces, men and women who had followed him across the galaxy, who had lost friends and family, who had fought and bled and refused to break. Military logic also said we should have lost its soul. It said we could not break Velthari shields. It said we were too young, too weak, too small. He smiled. "I am tired of military logic. Who wants to make history?" 340 ships jumped to Velthar Prime. The enemy fleet was waiting for them. The battle began at dawn on the Dominion homeworld. Citizens looked up at the sky and saw fire raining down like angry stars. Admiral Okonkwo knew he could not win through strength. He had to win through will. Human ships attacked in waves, hitting hard and pulling back, drawing enemy formations apart. When openings appeared, strike teams dove through, targeting command ships and supply vessels. Sergeant Marcus Cole led a boarding party onto a Velthari carrier. His soldiers, farmers, and teachers who had trained for 1 year fought hand-to-hand against warriors who had trained for centuries. They took the ship. They found 200 Kreeth slaves in the cargo hold, waiting to be sold. They set them free. "Get to the escape pods," Marcus told them. "We will cover you." The battle raged for 18 hours. Human ships fell. Heroes died. But for every human ship destroyed, 2 enemy vessels followed. The shield-breaking weapons cut through the Velthari like fire through paper. The allied species, seeing their supposed protectors losing, began to pull back. By the 15th hour, Admiral Okonkwo had 170 ships left. The enemy still had over 400. His ship was damaged. His crew was exhausted. But the Velthari command ships still flew, and Supreme Leader Kethros still commanded his fleet. James made a decision. "All ships, focus fire on the enemy center. Clear me a path. Admiral, the New Geneva cannot survive that run." "I know." The human fleet attacked with everything it had left. Ships that were barely holding together charged into the enemy formation. Pilots who had been awake for 20 hours flew with perfect precision. Slowly, impossibly, a gap opened in the Velthari lines. James pointed his ship at the gap, at the command vessel beyond. "Tell President Moreau that I did my duty," he said. "Tell her to finish this." The New Geneva accelerated. Enemy weapons struck the hull. Systems failed. Fires burned. James held the course. Supreme Leader Kethros saw the human ship coming. He saw that it would not stop. He saw what was about to happen. For the first time in his life, he screamed. The New Geneva struck the Velthari command ship at full speed. Both vessels exploded in a ball of fire that could be seen from the planet's surface. The citizens of Velthar Prime watched in stunned silence as their leader died. The enemy formation broke. Without Kethros, without the command ship, the fleet fell into chaos. The allied species fled. The Velthari captains, leaderless and terrified, broadcast their surrender. The war was over. On what remained of the human fleet, exhausted crews cheered and wept and held each other. They had lost so much. But they had won. They had won. The Galactic Council demanded an audience. President Catherine Moreau received the message on the bridge of her flagship, orbiting what had been the heart of the Velthari Dominion. Below her, the ancient homeworld of humanity's enemies burned with the fires of civil war. Across 100 systems, slave species rose up against their masters. The old order was dying. She read the Council's message twice. They wanted to negotiate. They wanted to restore order. They wanted to remind humanity of its place in the galaxy. Catherine smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Tell them I will come," she said. "But I will not come alone." 1 month later, Catherine stood in the center of the crystal chamber, where Elena Vasquez had stood 2 years ago. She wore a simple black uniform. Nothing fancy. Behind her stood representatives of the Kreth, the Morathi, the Senkari, and a dozen other species that had joined humanity's fight. They stood together now. Equals. The High Arbiters looked down from their ancient seats. The first voice, the crystal being who had ruled the council for 12,000 years, spoke first. "You have caused great destruction," he said. "You have broken treaties. You have upset the balance that has kept peace for millennia. The council demands an explanation." Catherine looked up at him. She did not bow. She did not apologize. "Your peace," she said, "protected those who had power. Your balance allowed the strong to crush the weak. The Velthari murdered 4 million of my people, and you called it ambiguous. They enslaved entire species, and you called it tradition. Your order was built on suffering, and you called it stability." She stepped forward. Her voice was calm, clear, and absolutely certain. "That order is over." The chamber erupted in noise. Representatives shouted and screamed. Some demanded that humanity be destroyed. Others called for calm. The first voice raised his hand, and slowly, Silence returned. You cannot change what has existed for 12,000 years, he said. You are one species. Young. Small. You do not have the right. Catherine turned to face the chamber. All 347 species, watching. We do not claim the right to rule, she said. We claim the right to justice. There is a difference. She activated a display. Images filled the air. The slave pens of the Velthari. The mass graves they had dug. The children they had used and discarded. Crime after crime, atrocity after atrocity, documented and undeniable. We found these things in Velthari space, Catherine said. We freed the slaves. We recorded the evidence. And now, we show the galaxy what your peace protected. The chamber was silent. Many representatives looked away from the images. Some wept. A few nodded slowly, as if they had always known but never wanted to see. We do not ask for empire, Catherine continued. We do not want to conquer. We want something simpler. We want a galaxy where this cannot happen again. Where the strong cannot murder and enslave without consequence. Where species like the Kreth do not suffer for 3,000 years while the Council watches and does nothing. The first voice stared at her. Light moved inside his crystalline body, faster now. What do you want? He asked. Reform, Catherine said. The Velthari Dominion will pay reparations to every species they harmed. They will free all slaves. Everywhere. Forever. Their war criminals will face trial. And the Council will change. No more will ancient species dictate peace while permitting atrocity. Justice will have teeth. Or humanity will give it teeth. You threaten us? I promise you. If this council cannot protect the innocent, humanity will. We have proven that we can. The debate lasted 3 days. Species that had supported the Velthari tried to argue for the old ways. But too many had seen the evidence. Too many remembered their own suffering. Too many were tired of a peace that was really just quiet oppression. In the end, the vote was close. But it passed. The Galactic Council reformed. 5 years later, the galaxy was different. Not perfect. Never perfect. But different. The Velthari Dominion no longer existed as an empire. It had fractured into smaller states. Still proud. Still difficult. But no longer able to threaten anyone. The species they had enslaved were free. Some struggled to build new lives. Others flourished. The Kreth, in particular, had found purpose. They became builders, healers, creators. They named their new capital city New Geneva. In honor of those who had died so that they might live. The council still met in its crystal chamber. But now, smaller species had voices. Now, there were courts that could punish crimes. Now, justice meant something. Humanity did not rule the galaxy. They did not want to. They returned to their worlds, rebuilt their fleets, continued to grow. But they watched. And the galaxy knew they were watching. On Earth, a memorial stood in what had once been a quiet park. It was made of black stone, and on its surface were carved 4,200,000 names. Every person who had died on New Geneva, every child, every family, every dream that had been burned away. Elena Vasquez, now Secretary General of the Reformed Council, visited the memorial every year on the anniversary of the attack. She would walk along the rows of names, touching some, remembering others. She never hurried. On the 5th anniversary, she was not alone. A young Kreth diplomat walked beside her. His name was Kareth, and he had been born in a Velthari slave pen. He had never known his parents. He had expected to die in chains. Now he walked free under an open sky, and he did not fully understand how it had happened. They stopped before a section of names. Children. So many children. I have a question, Kareth said quietly. I have been afraid to ask it. Ask, Elena said. Why did you do this? Your people suffered terribly for this war. Many died. You could have accepted the peace. You could have survived. Why did you choose to fight? Elena looked at the names. She thought about the mother begging for her children. She thought about Admiral Okonkwo flying his ship into the enemy command vessel. She thought about all the humans who had given everything for people they would never meet. Because we are human, she said. We are not a perfect species. We fight each other. We hurt each other. We make terrible mistakes, but there is something inside us that cannot accept injustice. Something that looks at suffering and says no, not here. Not while I can do something about it. She touched a name on the wall. Sarah Okonkwo. A teacher. A mother. Gone forever. Some things are worth more than survival, Elena said. Some things are worth dying for. Worth fighting for. Worth sacrificing everything for. Justice is one of them. Freedom is one of them. The lives of innocents who cannot protect themselves is one of them. Kareth was silent for a long moment. My people owe you everything, he said finally. Elena shook her head. Your people owe us nothing. What we did because it was right. Not for reward. Not for gratitude. Because some things must be done. Whatever the cost. She looked up at the sky. Stars were beginning to appear in the darkening blue. That is what it means to be human, she said. That is what we are. They stood together in silence as night fell over the memorial, and the names of the dead glittered in the starlight, remembered, honored, never forgotten. The galaxy had learned a lesson it would not soon forget. Humanity would not be commanded, and humanity would never forgive.